So, thanks guys for coming to Negotiation Boot Camp. Like I was saying, this is a new momentum class and focuses on kind of the components of a negotiation to help you kind of prep and service your clients. So we kind of dig through and break apart just what a negotiation is and go through tactics to really help you get better prepared for dealing with just certain kinds. So it teaches you kind of a foundational framework for handling a negotiation, kind of covers everything from like structuring your approach to navigating buyer and seller positions to tactics to be aware of, like I said. So you'll learn how to become more intentional and proactive with your approach with negotiations and hopefully a little bit more confident with them too, because I know that they can be a little tough. So let's jump in. So before we get into the strategies and tactics of negotiating a real estate transaction, it's important to lay kind of the foundation of the negotiation as a whole. So being able to identify like the key concepts and stages of a negotiation will kind of allow you a better opportunity to determine how you're going to proceed with your clients. So here are the key concepts that we're going to investigate first. So we have positions within a negotiation, interest, bottom line or minimum agreement, and then the zone of agreement. And you'll notice in your book on page 4 that I sent you a lot of like blank spots. So when we go through these, just kind of fill in the blanks with the words. You can write it on a piece of paper if you want to print it out later, or however works for you. It threw me when I first went through it because I'm like, what are all these blanks? Like, why does it not have any words? So the first one is positions. So positions are what in a negotiation. So positions consist of interest of your clients. Essentially, positions are a series of stances working to maximize the client's interests. So can you guys see those bolded words? Those are kind of what goes like in the blanks. And then next is your interests. So interests are the basic needs to be met. Interests are the underlying reasons, values, or motivations. And then interests are typically not expressed, but will be the primary influences for a client's position or a client's determining what they're going to do within this negotiation. So am I going too fast? Okay. Next is your bottom line. So the bottom line is the minimum agreement that the client is willing to accept. So beyond the bottom line, a client will walk away from a negotiation. So if the bottom line can't be met, they're going to walk away from it. And then finally, the zone of agreement. So the zone of agreement is the overlap between the buyers and sellers' bottom lines. So it's where any successful deal will fall into place. So on page 5, you can kind of see a place where you can draw the upcoming slides, but you can feel free to draw them out or do something similar. But this is kind of what that zone of agreement looks like. Maybe. Let me see if I can get through these. I didn't realize that they were like on a, there we go. Okay, so a deal that will happen. So a negotiation with a deal that will happen. This is what that zone of agreement looks like when a deal will happen typically. You can see that both buyers and sellers find a middle ground to agree within. So like I said, this is what that zone of agreement will look like when you are going to get a successful negotiation to go through. And then I want to show you what it'll look like when it won't happen. So as you can see, they kind of find that middle ground within this one. And then next, like I said, is an example of how it will look if it does not happen. So you can see that there's no starting positions or bottom lines that can be agreed upon. So remember that the goal of any negotiation is to clearly identify each party's interest and find a solution that fits within that zone. So I hope that makes a little bit more sense on what it kind of looks like. To me, I'm more of a visual person, so I like both of those graphics. But like I said on page, I think it was 5, you can draw these out if you want to. And I can resend this presentation to you guys too when we're done. So next is the stages of a negotiation. So contrary to popular belief, there is much more to a successful negotiation than simply facing off with the counterparty and winning the battle. So most of your time will be spent in the preparation and discovery stages, and they will inform any discussions that will take place within the bargaining stage. It's all kind of in stages. So preparation, discovery, and bargaining are all fluid and are all designed to create a smooth closing stage at the end. So let's look at each of these in a little bit more detail. So first, preparation. Again, these are on page 6 with a lot of blanks, so fill them in as you go. But the preparation stage focuses on information gathering and developing strategies. So information gathering also identifies the client's interest, resources, alternatives, and targets. So developing strategies help you better kind of understand the negotiating points. These are prioritized as must-haves, nice-to-haves, or maybe some trade-offs. Your initial strategy should include starting and secondary positions, as well as kind of walk-away terms. So you need to kind of start identifying all of these as you're dealing with your clients, what their must-haves are, maybe some trade-offs, starting position and secondary position, and what they're going to walk away from. And is anybody in here kind of doing anything as far as either with buyers or sellers like this? Are you guys identifying any targets, trade-offs, anything like that beforehand?
I think it's very important that you start that way. In today's climate, though, it's a little bit more difficult. You have to really set your expectations to your buyers as to what they're getting into, because
Absolutely.
the negotiating part of it right now, I mean, we can, come in, but if you don't come in with a strong position to begin with, you're going to end up losing out on it. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but in normal times, I mean, I think it's important to understand the seller's motivation, and come up with some strategies. I think negotiation is a phenomenal thing, and the more you're prepared going in, the better off you're going to be. But it's a little bit different with today's market. As far as negotiating, the sellers are in a much better position than the buyers are.
Right. And Ron, to your point too, because I think you nailed it, is with the market being the way that it is, talking about this with a lot of urgency and speed ahead of time can kind of alleviate that, because I know that things are moving way faster than probably what they're even being listed at, so being able to just kind of educate our clients, whether they're buyers or sellers, from the very beginning on just, hey, this is going to happen. We're going to have to negotiate. It's going to go really fast. So I need to identify, your must-haves, your nice-to-haves, maybe some trade-offs. Those are all key points. I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you. So next, we're going to go to the discovery stage. And like you said, Ron, this is kind of where you're focusing on the counterparty's interest and what they value. So the more facts that you can learn about the counterparty's motivations, the stronger your offer is going to be. Which takes us to the bargaining stage. So the bargaining stage provides the biggest opportunity to influence the outcome of your negotiation. So the process typically consists of an offer, counter offers, concessions, and contingencies, right? I mean, we're pretty used to that. So your attention should go towards your client's objectives and interests. When appropriate, a concession plan can help bridge the gap towards a mutually agreed upon outcome. Does that make sense? Okay. And then finally, after you get through all those stages, you're going to have a closing stage of a negotiation. So the closing stage has a higher psychological impact on the results of a negotiation. So you want to develop a plan to close the remaining gap together, either by exchanging concessions or by exploring alternative trade-offs. Identifying cues that can weaken your client's position is this final stage, such as eagerness to close, threats or warnings, or guilting about previous concessions. A lot of those we're going to get into in a little bit too, but we hear that every day in our market. So the agreement will be completed once the middle ground of that zone of agreement is reached, like I showed you in that graphic. So the truth is, negotiation is not an active battle, it's a process of discovery. So the goal is to uncover as much information as possible, which is why developing a system for handling negotiation and the process is the key component. The next two sections will kind of break down the negotiation process from both sides of the transaction, so your buy side and your seller side. It's worth noting, though, that while the primary negotiation in a transaction is between the buyer and seller and the respective agents, you, as the agent, engage in the process of negotiating expectations and creating realistic goals directly with your clients at the same time. And it can be tough. So, right now, does anybody have any questions about any of these stages? Do you think you're kind of doing all these, whether you've broken it down, obviously, or not? Do you think you're kind of hitting all these when you get into a negotiation? Awesome. Let's get into the buyer side first. So, when working with a buyer, the focus must be on clarifying not only what is most important to them, but why it's important. So, this becomes the foundation for helping your clients prioritizing their interests. So, when we went through the stages of the negotiation at the first part, the preparation stage was all about understanding the motivations. So, when determining where to start with your initial offer, there are four key areas to focus on, which is gathering information, prioritizing interest, refining positions, and then clarifying that bottom line. So, we're going to kind of go through these when we talk about some scripts around them that you can use to uncover all of these. Also, in your book, it again provides spaces on page 9 is where it starts as we go through these, where you can kind of write down how you would maybe navigate some of these in your own words, or maybe some things that you want to remember around these scripts. Because again, we don't ever want to take these scripts and just use them verbatim. We don't want to be robotic, but it definitely gives some good things to think about. So, what I would like each of you to do is complete this criteria sheet. This is the first script. So, what I would like each of you to do is to complete this criteria sheet so we can build the vision of your perfect home. I'll step out for a moment while you complete it. Just open the door when you're finished. And then once they get done, how did it go? So, do you see value in using a sheet like this? Great. It's extremely important that we get focused, because reacting in a marketplace without pre-established criteria is like going to the grocery store why you're hungry, basically. So something along those lines. I mean, I know that's really long and winded, but it gives the idea that you can insert a criteria sheet so then they can write down what is most important to them, what their trade-offs could be, and what they're really interested in as far as their property. So does anybody kind of use a criteria sheet right now? Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, I use one. I haven't done it this way. I haven't given it to them. I normally, when I'm interviewing, I'm gonna use a criteria sheet. But I mean, this looks like a good idea as well.
Yeah, I like it.
Mm-hmm. How else would you guys maybe use a script like this? Like I said, I know it's kind of long and winded. I personally would like take out like, oh, what do you think about the sheet or whatever? But do you guys do something a little similar or have any ideas? Hi, Jean. Thanks for joining us.
Sorry I'm late.
Oh, you're fine. Jean, I'm going to forward you the workbook real quick.
That's fine.
And we were like on page 9, I think, or something. So anyway, just feel free to take these scripts and kind of make them your own. I do like it because it gives them the opportunity, takes it off of your back from asking like lots of questions. If you make that criteria sheet really intentional with what you were trying to identify, that can be really powerful for you and also save you a lot of time. So next, we're going to go to prioritizing interests. So now that we start the conversation around what they have identified, and it's up to you to prioritize them. So try something like a script like this. So since all of your needs are priority 1, what I would like to do now is prioritize your wants. So looking at your wants, what's the one thing that would make all of the others seem not as important? What's the second most important? And then what's the third? And doing that again can help you identify just what they're really focusing on and what maybe a trade-off might be. Is anybody kind of prioritizing right now? I know in some of our other classes we have scripts around like, okay, what would make it like a 10 or a 10 plus? You could do that as well. but it's something really good and I think powerful that you could do in a conversation.
Yeah, I think it's important. I mean, to understand what their priorities are, especially in the initial stages when you're starting to look for them, because you don't want to start showing them things that have no interest or not a priority to them. So the more you can do up front, as far as getting their priorities and their wants down, I mean, the better off you're going to be as you go, start your search, obviously.
Right. Absolutely. So, hi, Joy. So next, you're going to determine based on their priorities how they should price or counter offer. So it's important to not only have this conversation, but also to be the educator in case it happens. So remember that objections can be overcome when talking about things ahead of time. So when you're ready for the refining stage, try a script like this. So now that we've identified our priorities, let's talk about where we should price our offer. If they counter offer, how much would you ideally like to raise our secondary offer to? Something along those lines. It's real basic, but also very powerful. So, when you guys kind of have something like this happen in the field, are you partnering that with like a CMA or pricing tools currently?
I haven't formally, but
Mhm.
just based on the market, I can share my knowledge of the market as far as where we should start, and if they do counter, but probably be better to have some, depending on what you're looking at, to have some CMA information to back up what you're,
Yeah.
coaching them on.
And I definitely would recommend it, which is why I asked the question, because like we were talking about earlier, Ron, when we started the class, everything is going so fast. So if we can have those tools in front of us, even if you don't plan on pulling it out, you can just still have it in your back pocket. So lastly, you want to clarify the bottom line again, in case it happens, and also to be the expert agent in their mind. So to do that, maybe something along the lines of, my goal is to keep our negotiation as close to your initial offer as possible, but we should discuss the limits of what you feel is appropriate for this home. What is the absolute maximum you would be willing to offer in order to secure this property? Is anybody kind of using dialogue a little similar to that? What's your maximum? What's your minimum? Where are you going to walk away at? Or what are you going to trade off on? Those are all very important questions when you're trying to negotiate or planning on a negotiation opportunity.
I usually just let the offer go. Let them know that if it seems low, they may counter.
Right.
Just let them know what their options are with the offer that they've given and what can
Perfect.
happen, and then take it from there. I don't offer any, or I don't ask for any. What's your highest price, or when will you back out? It's just take it, and always try to keep the conversation going is the main thing. Just as long as you can
Absolutely.
keep conversation between the buyer and the seller, you've got a great chance of getting the deal done.
You are exactly right. This is just another graphic of just showing that buyer starting position and then your secondary position, which you're trying to identify so you know ahead of time, and then your bottom line. So again, and that clarifying script is down below. So that takes us to our discovery stage, and this is all about learning what's important to the seller and staying in the mindset of curiosity. So you can determine seller motivations and interests by asking lots of questions, commenting on previous sales of comparable properties, or inquiring or suggesting negotiation points to improve their offer. So, can anybody think of what else we can do to learn their motivations or interest prior to submitting the offer, the initial offer? Thinking creatively is my question. There's a lot that you can do creatively. Like I said, that criteria sheet's really good. You can maybe do this via video as well. Don't be afraid of that. Or you could maybe consider it virtually, maybe through a Zoom call, whatever works for you and for the time. So knowing what's valuable to the counterparty lets you more intelligently craft an offer that can stand out. So the key here is to look for interests that are a high priority for the seller, but a low priority for the buyer to create that win-win scenario. This lays the groundwork for that bargaining stage. And I know that you guys as agents, you're constantly working within our market with, the other agent in that deal. And that's what you guys are trying to do, is just figure out between the both of you what high priorities and low priorities are going to make or break this deal. So once you've gathered the necessary information and kind of prioritized it for your clients, it's time for the offer to be sent. So start the bargaining stage by anchoring your offer based on what you feel is near the lower end of the seller's zone of agreement. Some things to consider when agreeing on the right offer, maybe that might be CMAs or just different comparables, range of starting and secondary positions, or just a timing need. Some other questions that you can ask to ensure your buyer understands the optimal price point for the initial offer. Again, think about doing that via video or maybe in person, just explaining the whole plan. You can even do like a graphic kind of like James Wood had in that buyer's or seller's guide, just something that kind of outlines the whole process and generates those questions for you from them. So once that offer has been made, one of two things are going to happen. So either the offer is going to be accepted or the negotiation proceeds to that closing stage, and there's a counter offer. And you'll return to that preparation and discovery stages prior to that before submitting the next counter offer. So when negotiating that counter offer, it's important to create a concession plan based on the lowest priority of interest for your client. So concessions are the key to improving your client's offer. Some examples, again, are price, terms, dates or a timeline, inclusions or exclusions, or maybe even some contingencies. Can anybody think of any other examples of concessions that maybe you've seen right now? Because I know our market's really fast. Something that maybe could improve the offer. It's okay if you can't. I'm just curious because you guys are in it, so I didn't know if there was other concessions out there right now with the speed of things.
Well, yeah, that's the biggest thing right now is the time to close. I mean, if you're going in a 60-day time to close against somebody that's got an offer 30-day and it's the same offer, obviously I would go with the quicker close. So I think that's something that's important right now.
Yeah, and remember, these concessions, not all of them have to be monetary either. So
the inspections.
Yeah, inspections is a good one too.
Right.
Maybe something, because we're a lake market, maybe something with, the dock or Ameren could possibly be a thing. I don't know, just speaking out loud, but so anyway, the closing stage happens when the seller identifies your client's offer as meeting their needs, although there may still be some final details to solidify. So at this point, you should employ that concession plan based on the interest of both your buyer and seller. This will allow you to slowly work towards, again, that zone of agreement to find that win-win. So the focus should be to maximize value for the buyer by focusing on interests of minor importance or concentrating on retaining the highest value of interest. So is anybody working with a concession plan? Like, what does that look or sound like? Anybody know?
No, I haven't worked with one.
Okay. Well, I didn't have time to put it in the slide, but I've also done, I just pulled up some Google searches. So like concession plans for real estate agents or something like that. Feel free to do something like that and just kind of see what other agents are doing. I felt like there was a lot of great examples as well on just how you can get a little bit better with those. And now we're going to switch to the seller negotiation. So we covered the buyers. Now we're going to look at sellers. And this is a lot like the buy side of a negotiation. the sell side maximizes the chances of getting full value for your client. So by being intentional and following the 4 stages of a negotiation, you'll increase, again, that likelihood of a positive outcome for your client. So again, following the stages of that, these are 4 stages again, like the buy side. So we have gathering information, prioritizing interest, refining positions, and then clarifying that bottom line again. So like I said, very similar. And again, on this section, page 13, you can write out how you would navigate through each of these in your own words or some points that you would like to remember. So first, again, we're going to gather information and prioritize interest. So a great way to do this with sellers is to use your pre-conversational activities that we go through in listing conversion. So asking those pre-listing questions, maybe assembling some pricing tools or a CMA, confirming appointment, preparing a listing agreement, getting in the right mindset and arriving on time. I mean, all of those help, but I definitely think those first 2 are very valuable for sellers and negotiations. Is there anything else that you guys are doing to kind of gather information from sellers right now? Again, I'm thinking like Zoom calls maybe, or virtual things. Email, I know, is probably pretty powerful too. No worries, just a question. So next, once you've gathered information on what is important to them, again, you need to prioritize that. And this is where that script, and it probably sounds very familiar because we cover it in listing conversion too, but it's that on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being very desirable and 1 not being very desirable, what's one thing that must happen to make the sell of your home a 10? And then you kind of branch that from there. So, okay, I know what your 10 is, what's going to be your 10 plus or your 10 plus plus, or what's going to make your experience the greatest, and then even better than that. However you want to word it, but something similar like that can be really great for you to uncover what's going to make them have the best experience with you and for this transaction. So you can also consider questions like, what's important to you about whatever they clarify as being that 10 or that 10 plus plus. Being able to ask that can uncover a little bit more information as well. Or maybe something like, is there anything else that's just important to you? So make sure that you're prioritizing those seller needs for this preparation stage. And then after you prioritize them and get that sense, then you're going to refine the position again. So, and this is what it looks like on the seller side. Again, very similar to the buyer side. You're trying to figure out their starting position, that secondary position, and then their bottom line. So something, again, another script for that refining position that you could try would be something like, now that we've identified our priorities, let's talk about where we should price our offer. Before any offers come in to you guys, let's go through a series of potential counter offers so we can be prepared for each one. You can come up with some different examples here if you'd like, especially use what our market's currently doing. Like Ron was saying earlier, our market's moving very fast. You could have multiple offers come through just within hours of submitting it. Just being able to educate them through that process is huge. So you can also consider a CMA here as well if you need some backup material. And then after you've kind of refined your position with something similar, you're going to clarify that bottom line again, much like the buy side. So again, another script you could consider is, our goal is to maximize the value you get for selling your home. However, if we meet a compatible buyer that satisfies your needs, do you have a lower limit? Do you have a lower position? What would you still feel like the sale is a success at that price? So again, trying to figure out what their secondary positions are, what's going to make or break them. And those are all really strong questions. So once an offer has been submitted by the buyer, the discovery stage begins. So the intention is to learn what's important for them, and then what methods you can use to learn key motivations and interests of them once that's been received. So again, remember to maybe ask lots of questions. identify potential selling points that improve the value of the home. And again, you're going to probably do this with the buyer's agent as well, just communicating, their bottom line, maybe their secondary positions between the two of you, so you can both be prepared when these offers keep coming back and forth. And then just remember, knowing what's valuable to that counterparty lets you more intellectually craft that offer, that counter offer. So the key here is to look for interests that are a high priority for the buyer, but a low priority for your seller. This lays the groundwork for that bargaining stage. So after learning the interest of the buyer in the discovery stage, it's time for that counteroffer to be sent. So think back to that secondary position you established with your client. Does it show a meaningful progression towards that zone of agreement? Is it not coming close to that zone of agreement? And then what are you going to do kind of around that? You got to go back to, their interests and priorities, maybe their secondary position, and really just ask lots of questions to identify what's going to make or break that deal. So once the counteroffer has been made, again, one of two things are going to happen. It's either going to be accepted, or you're going to go back and you're going to do that preparation discovery a little bit more before you're negotiating your next offer. So it's, again, important to create a concession plan based off of the lowest priority of interest for your client. So again, some great things for this concessions are price, terms, date and timelines, exclusions and exclusions, and then contingencies. So very similar to the buy side. And then finally, your closing stage. So this happens when both the buyer and seller agree on that offer. It meets both their needs, even though there might be some details that don't. But for the most part, it's meeting everybody's needs. And at this point, you should employ your concession plan for them and then get that zone of agreement or that win-win. Any questions on both of those buyer seller sides? Okay. So then we're going to get into negotiation tactics, which are the fundamental concepts that you can use to help your clients maximize their value. So while it's important to understand how to employ these tactics, it is equally as important to be able to recognize them so you know how to handle it if it comes up. So it can be challenging. I mean, all negotiations are pretty challenging, but, just keep your feet firmly planted and your mindset right. And you should be pretty good once you kind of have an understanding around these tactics. So keep in mind, too, that the goal is not to win at the expense of the counterparty either. So the first one is concession guilt. So concession guilt is designed to force unwanted compromise from the counterparty. So for example, party A might offer to close quickly if party B will offer a concession on the price, when in fact timing is not a priority to party B. So preparation is the best resource in a situation like this, and stick to the positions that you guys have agreed upon, your clients and you as the agent. And that way your client won't get derailed on a negotiation tactic like this. Does that make sense? Okay. Next one is your extreme anchors. So anchors are employed to kind of slant the relative starting point of a negotiation. So in order for you to most effectively handle these anchors, you must have a total understanding of the interest of your client and be prepared and comfortable with the various positions you've agreed upon. So that's your first, secondary, and even your final positions. So if your counterparty, particularly maybe on the buy side, opens with an extreme offer outside of your zone, the best response is to simply acknowledge that their offer is unworkable. So don't be afraid to just say, hey, this is not a win-win. It's not going to work. Misdirections and bluffs. So while not typically done in good faith, concealing or exaggerating facts or tactics, you might be confronted with be confronted with this in a negotiation. So all of these are to kind of skew that narrative on what is deemed fair in a negotiation. So consider taking a break until you and your client can come together more and reach an agreement. Also, be on the lookout for claims that seem too good to be true. So make sure that you investigate each thing very closely. The best way to handle this tactic is by clarifying all available information for both parties. So just work with that other agent, make sure that you're asking lots of questions and you're clarifying any kind of possible situation that might arise. Threats and warnings. So threats and warnings are employed to heighten the counterparty's emotional state or maybe cloud their decision making. So these hard bargaining tactics are typically you don't really rely on an even flow of information, basically. So naming or ignoring a threat are two ways to kind of diffuse this tactic. Just don't be threatened, don't take warnings, stick to your ground and stick to what you and your clients have agreed on. And then unreciprocated offers. So when making an offer, you may find your counterpart ask you to make a concession before making a counter offer. Don't bid against yourself in this situation. To overcome this challenge, simply request that the counterparty submit a counter offer that you can then bring back to your client. So like I said, don't do any decision making too quickly. Go ahead and take some time for yourself, and make sure that it's right for your client and what you guys have agreed upon. Lastly, urgency. This is where your counterpart may stress the need for urgency in a negotiation to create scarcity or elicit concessions from your client. So be sure to revisit that discovery stage to learn more about the interest of the counterparty before responding to an offer. So focus your client's attention on the content of the offer rather than the official deadline. This is a valuable strategy to most effectively determine kind of where you're going to go next. So then dealing with irrational decision makers. So when you're kind of confronted with somebody who's irrational, consider whether your counterparty is suffering from one of these things. So they're either ill-informed, constrained maybe, or has other interests. So if you're dealing with someone who seems to be making irrational decisions, consider first whether they are ill-informed. Your job is to find out what they don't know and then inform them. Alternatively, they might be constrained, but don't want to expose what those constraints are. So if someone is or has all the appropriate information, but still doesn't want to make a rational decision, you are likely to find that they are constrained in some way. So common constraints could be maybe pending mortgage approval, spousal disagreement, or career inflexibility, something along those lines, something personal. If they are informed and there doesn't seem to be any hiccups coming from them, but they're still like not really deciding, they could have other interests at play, obviously. So ask questions to draw any potential interests that could conflict your situation with them, and then try to provide information to counteract that. And then remember too that offers are rarely non-negotiable. The best way to move forward is often to level the playing field by making sure all information is known by both parties. And then finally, before we wrap up this class, I just want to challenge you guys to look at your current negotiation strategies, maybe even go back to our YouTube channel, because we did a negotiation class earlier this year. Maybe revisit some of that with Jeff and Jason, and just learn how to get more systematic with your approach, and don't be afraid to get creative either. So does anybody have any questions? I hopefully didn't go through that too fast, but I really appreciate you guys for taking time out of your day and coming. So
Yeah, it's good stuff, Kaylin. Thank you very much.
you're welcome. If you guys need anything, just shoot me an email. I'll be happy to help. So
Thank you.
All right,
thanks,
thank
guys.
you.
Have a good one.
See you guys.